Hello, I'm John Pollock, along with John Randine and Robin Black. This is Fight News Now. We are going to get into a number of topics. Before we look ahead, I want to get some of your reaction, Robin, because me and John discussed the passing of Kimbo Slice earlier this week, but you haven't had a chance to really weigh in, at least on this show thus far. What was your impression of Kimbo Slice? Obviously, a real important figure over the last decade in mixed martial arts and somebody that was Bellator's top draw.
You know, strangely, I got this feeling that he was a sweet man. I always got that from him for some reason. So the first thing when I heard this young guy had passed away was the first thing that hit me was that he had 6 children. You know what I mean? And that ends up moving you as much as whatever they did competitively. And when we talked about Muhammad Ali, I know skill-wise and what they did as combat sportsmen were very different. But we talked about Muhammad Ali, we talked about all the things he did outside of the ring, all the ways that he influenced the world, and they were massive. Kimbo Slice, you look at the way he influenced culture. You know, he was a mixed martial arts star, he was a combat sportsman, but he influenced the idea of viral media. He influenced the idea of the internet culture, viral culture, YouTube culture. That is a huge, huge thing. When you think of virality, you think of him and some of those crazy backyard fights.
Yeah, I think that's a real important part of his legacy, was taking that online audience and a promotion, being able to capitalize and turn that into television viewers, which is something that was consistent throughout his entire run in mixed martial arts.
And that's something we see now in all types of things. People can find an audience on YouTube, and some of them move back to old school media like this one. And but he was one of the very first.
All right, next weekend, the UFC is going to be in Ottawa, Ontario. It's their return to Canada. You guys are going to be there in Ottawa covering the show. It is headlined by a great fight at welterweight involving Rory MacDonald and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. As much as we look forward to this actual fight, I think a lot of the talk next week is going to surround Rory MacDonald and what his status will be with the UFC out of this fight, whether it is win or lose. He has thrown that topic out there, and that's going to be a big news item to watch next week.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of questions. As A, going into this fight with Stephen Thompson, we have not seen Rory MacDonald in action since that ridiculous fight with Robbie Lawler. This is a fight that could change anybody's life. You just have to look throughout history. The Shogun, for example, that fight with Dan Henderson did not seem to be the same Shogun we have seen in the past. And will we get to see this type of fighter, a guy that's aggressive, that is motivated to become the greatest fighter of all time, or will he be a little gun shy? And clearly nobody wants to take that type of damage, and I'm interested to know what type of Rory MacDonald will we see because of that. And you pointed out, you need a victory if you want to get a huge contract with either your current company, being the UFC, or other suitors being Bellator or One Championship or some of these other organizations.
That's what Dan Henderson spoke about after his win this past weekend, the fact he was going into this last fight. That adds something. There is that extra added pressure that this is an unofficial audition for whoever your next place of employment is going to be.
Yeah, well, once you're a free agent, other people can come to you and say, we'd like to offer you this. And then the UFC can go, and we will match it. And I expect that's what's going to happen, win or lose in this case. Rory MacDonald's a very valuable fighter. He's an exciting fighter. He's a unique fighter as an athlete, but also as an individual. You know, when you watch these people, I mean, look at that guy. Man, I've looked back at these Lawler fights, and these are something even more special than I thought they were at the time. I got a breakdown coming up Monday about how Rory can approach Stephen Thompson. It's a very, very tough fight. But this fight, Ramdeen, you are correct. It will change you, regardless. Rory believes it changed him for the better. He believes it pushed him to limits that he now knows he can reach, and that will make him an even more ferocious fighter.
When you approach a breakdown like this, Robin, and you're looking at Rory and you see the things that John outlined, it's been 11 months, it was a war he was involved with. Do you look at little things, and are there certain questions you have of, wow, will he be able to duplicate this? Will there be any areas where maybe we see an improved Rory MacDonald drawing upon that experience and having 11 months where you are working at the gym, you're working on new things?
Whether you're, any kind of analysis that you're doing is exciting and it's fun, but there are a million variables, and a lot of those are the unknowns, those things that you mentioned.
The unknown unknowns.
The unknown unknowns. There are some unknowns that we know, and then there are some unknowns that are unknown, and how he will respond to that is one of those unknown unknowns. So you just work with what you have. Wonder Boy is an incredible, unique challenge, and you have to approach him technically. You have to beat him technically. If you are paying all attention to your technical assignments, then ferocity can help. But you can't become a more ferocious beast and think you're going to use that, because if you rush Wonder Boy, he manipulates space and he catches you with intercepting shots.
Yeah, 8 days away. That's just an outstanding main event. The Ottawa card will also feature Donald Cerrone taking on Patrick Cote. And I would say in the case of Donald Cerrone, for opponents, there aren't a ton of unknowns. Most opponents, they look at Donald Cerrone, they know what kind of fight to expect, and Donald Cerrone is a pretty open book about what kind of fight he wants to have, and it presents a lot of problems for guys, even with that knowledge going in.
Yeah, but Patrick Cote, he doesn't seem to be affected at all. He goes, I understand exactly what's in front of me. He goes, I'm not going to hide anything. Donald Cerrone, a notoriously slow starter, I am going after this guy. And Robin and I were having the conversation that Patrick Cote, although he's so ridiculously talented, he fought at 205 pounds, fought for the UFC 185-pound championship. It's 170 pounds that really seems to be the home for Patrick Cote. And although he isn't this massive draw, I mean, he is a massive draw if you're a true fight fan and you love the martial arts, I think this could be the performance that we see from Patrick Cote that kind of catapults him back into, not into the spotlight. When you're fighting for the middleweight championship, you're certainly in the spotlight, but people will certainly go, wow, I did not realize how darn good Patrick Cote was. And I think some people realized it in that fight with Ben Saunders, but I think this is going to be the fight that people really remember Patrick Cote
And
for.
this one is literally known versus unknown. We know what Cowboy Cerrone is, and it's awesome. A lot of people, including Cerrone, probably don't know what Patrick Cote is. And Patrick Cote is a hell of a boxer who grew up a military man, very relaxed in the cage, just really in control of his weapons, doesn't make very many mistakes, super sound. And man, he gets better and better, and in his mid-30s, he's a better fighter than he's ever been. Lots of power, good counterpuncher. He's a lot more of a threat to Cowboy Cerrone than people outside of Canada think he is.
And I think one of the reasons why is because Patrick Cote is so comfortable in life. He has that gig in RDS, he has a bunch of other businesses, and he says,
He's got a hot tub.
Yes, he does. And he said, I don't need to do this. I get into the cage because I want to. And many fighters that we've talked to in the past, when they have that freedom, you get to see their best performances.
Last thing, John, tell us a bit about Jonathan Mooney, who's fighting at a TriStar, and he's a late replacement taking the spot of Alex Garcia.
Yeah, Joe Mooney, 7-0. Robin and I have called a number of his fights. This is a very motivated individual. We were in a hotel and we smelled some pot. And we asked if it was him. He's like, no, I would never do that. I'm focused on being the best martial artist out there. It's like, hey, man, we're not judging. We were just asking. This is a guy that I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy watching because of his ferocious style. And I think it's a good pickup by the UFC.
For the record, Rammer was asking because he wanted to find out, because he wanted to go there.
All right, they will be heading to Ottawa next week. We will have coverage all week long leading into Saturday night's card. Keep it tuned here to Fight Network all week long leading into Saturday's event, headlined by Rory MacDonald and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.